All right, folks, what we got here today is a unicorn, an honest-to-God, dyed-in-the-wool unicorn. Why is it a unicorn? Because it's a 2010 Honda Interceptor 1200F with 0 miles on it. I took this bike out of the crate myself. And if you've ever seen an Interceptor before, you haven't seen one with 0 miles on it. Let me get rid of this stupid thing. It's hard to breathe in there. Okay, now, why is this bike special? Do you guys know what an Interceptor is? They're legendary, going back to the mid-'80s. The first time I heard an Interceptor go by, the sound of the gear-driven cams, 700cc motor, yeah, it just got me going. It was really fired up. And then in the late 80s, I was able to go to a company called Grossglockner Alpenstrasse Tours, where they used Honda Interceptors to go take you all over the Alps. Really neat alpine tours, fantastic. It's on your bucket list, it should be. If you want to ride in the Alps, those guys know what to do, and they really have nice bikes to ride around on. But what about this? How the hell with the Interceptor history? I don't need to listen to somebody talk about a 30-year-old motorcycle. What about this bike? This is the 7th generation of Interceptors. And in this generation of Interceptor, you could get it one of two ways. You could get it with a 6-speed manual transmission, what we have right here, or we could get it with the Honda dual clutch transmission. That basically means an automatic transmission, push button, gear changing, and it's automatically changing the gears for you. Now, when this bike came out, this basic bike, the bike you see in front of you at the dealership, was $16,900. That is not a small amount of money, but the dual clutch transmission version of the bike was $20,000. So as you can see, this was not a cheap bike. Now, a little bit about the stats. We have 1,237 cc's, give or take. So, you know, they're rounding down. It's 1,200 cc motorcycle. We've got 145 horsepower. That's pretty cool. And we've got 81 foot-pounds of torque at as low as 3,000 RPM. Now, let's talk a little bit about that whole idea of a V4 motor. So when Honda came out with the V4 motors initially, that was this sort of a neat combination. We had the torque of a V-twin, but you had the smoothness of a 4-cylinder, and you had the rev ability of a 4-cylinder. This bike is a 1,200 cc bike that has no problem going 10,000 RPM, and that's a lot. Yet, interestingly enough, the bike makes very good power down low. Like we said, 80 foot-pound of torque at as low as 3,000 RPM. That's pretty neat too. Built into this bike, and this is a funny thing about you know, the tuner type people that are like, well, I got that motorcycle, and the first thing I did was I got rid of that factory exhaust because, you know, you're going to save weight and everything else, and really open the bike up and let it breathe and make it sound ferocious. Well, don't get rid of this exhaust because Honda put a very special exhaust on here. It has a power valve built into the exhaust so that under 4,000 RPM, the valve is closed. So when you're in first gear and second gear, under 4,000 RPM, the valve stays closed and keeps you with that nice torque. You get a nice back pressure, you keep the torque in the motor, that's cool. And then at 4,000 RPM, it opens up. And that, it unleashes the beast, so to speak. And that really changes. The bike has dual personality. It's got the down low grunt that it needs, but you get over that 4,000 RPM point, first and second gear, and then 6,000 RPM for your higher gears. That valve opens up, and boy, you can really tell. You're on the bike, you can feel it, you can also hear it when that valve opens up. It is a cool thing. We're talking about 613 pounds wet. So this is a bike, and we checked, they're not lying about the weight on that one. This bike is on the road at 613 pounds. Really cool. It's shaft drive, so there's no maintenance on the back end. There's no chain maintenance or anything else. The bike comes with factory combined ABS, and that means if you really wanted to make a bad braking decision today, throw caution to the wind, just crush the rear brake and see what happens. Nope, this bike is actually going to weigh that decision and decide whether or not that's a smart thing to let you do. So the bike is looking out for you. It's a really smart system. We dig it. How quick is this bike? Because it's, you know, you think of that 1,200 cc, you got the V4 motor. I'll bet you it's pretty quick. Well, imagine if you will a quarter mile. Take that high school football track you used to have to run around and how much you hated it, stretch that out into a quarter mile. You drag racing fans are way ahead of me on this one. Imagine if you could go from 0 to 135 miles an hour in 1/4 of a mile. Well, this bike can do that, and that's nothing short of incredible. Doing 135 miles an hour in the quarter, that's faster than the Kawasaki 1400 Concourse. That's a bike that held the industry standard for a long time. So this is a quick bike. You're going to do a 10-second quarter mile at 135 miles an hour. Just imagine going to 135 miles an hour in only 10 seconds. That's a fast motorcycle, and it really is. You can adjust the suspension on this bike in flight. It's another one of those bikes that has that fantastic crank. You can reach down, adjust the suspension to tune the suspension. Maybe you're going along some twisties, or maybe you're just going to be on the super slab. You can change the suspension. It does have the fully adjustable Showa suspension, front and rear, as you would expect. This is Honda's premier top-of-the-line bike. Safety and performance. A little bit about the safety. You ever heard of a slipper clutch? Do you know what a slipper clutch is? This bike has one. What that means is when you're going around a corner, you're going into a bend and you drop a gear and you let that clutch out, well, normally that would be catastrophic, because what's going to happen is your rear tire is going to change speed suddenly. You're going to lose your friction package and the back of the bike is going to kick out. You're going to get introduced to a guy I like to call Mr. Low Side. And he's better than his friend, Mr. High Side. But a slipper clutch takes that and smooths that out. So when you get that rearward pressure on that tire, it softens it up. And basically, it's kind of funny. If you take one apart, it looks a lot like a CVT transmission inside, and that's kind of sharp. Learn about slipper clutches. They're very cool, and they're going to save your life. This bike has slipper clutch built right into it. Really, really a neat motorcycle. It has a lot going for it. Now, the interesting thing is this motorcycle, Honda decided that the VFR was going to be a sport touring bike. They were not going to build it as a sport bike, because previous VFRs were basically built as sport bikes. Remember that this motor, this is the RC212V motor. You're like, oh, I'm a GP racing fan. Well, then you know this motor. The RC212V is what the competition version of this motor is, and it doesn't give up much by being in this chassis. However, they went for sport touring on this. You could order right out of the Honda catalog. You could order the hard bags, you could order the top case, taller windshield, heated grips, everything you wanted to make this bike a super slab rocket. Here's the problem. When it came out, this bike has a 4.9, let's call it a 5-gallon gas tank. And this bike is not known for being particularly frugal on the gas. So you're going to get between 150 and 200 miles of range on a tank of gas. And as we were talking about in some of our other videos, these sport touring bikes today, people expect them to have a 250-mile range. Now, I don't know too many people that like to sit in the seat for 250 miles. I like to get up and stretch my legs a little bit. But this bike, it wasn't soft enough for the sport touring people. So it was a little too sporty for the sport touring guys, the ST dudes, and it was a little too touring for the sporty guys. So you can see for a $16,000 price point, Honda missed it in a little bit of an area. But I've ridden a lot of these, and what I can tell you is they are gobs of fun. And whereas the bike was probably too expensive for me to run right out and buy one at $16,000 back in 2010, right now we're selling this bike at 10,000 miles with, or $10,000, strike that, with 0 miles on the odometer. This bike literally put a battery in it, prepped it, made sure it's good to go. We haven't driven it 1 mile yet. It's still 0 miles on the bike. Straight from a Honda dealer where it sat in a crate. Really a great opportunity to own a piece of history, and VFRs are history. They are very rewarding to ride. You will love this bike. If you like cracking the throttle, if you like digging into a corner, you're really going to enjoy this bike. But it also gives you the safety margin if you're not Ricky Rocket, if you're not the guy who spends the weekends at track days, you want to still go out and tear it up in the twisties, this is the bike for you. Because you throw your bags on it and now you can drive it to California. That's pretty handy to have in one motorcycle. It's the one motorcycle that does the job of a couple of different ones. If you have any questions about this, you're going to reach out to us and you're going to find us at ClevelandMoto.com. If you are nutso for this bike and you need to have it right now, you're going to pick up the phone and you're going to call 216-795-5580. You're going to talk to one of us about the 2010 Honda VFR 1200F Interceptor. Remember, folks, ride fast and take chances.